This is Anisha, and here is my Emulating Emily project. The poem I chose was The World Feels Dusty. The world feels dusty when we stop to die. We want the dew then, honor's taste try. Flags vex a dying face, but the least fan, stirred by a friend's hand, cools like the rain. Mine be the ministry when thy thirst comes, dues of thyself to fetch and holy bombs. Alright, this poem has 3 stanzas, 11 lines, and each stanza has a different rhyme scheme. The first stanza has an ABCB rhyme scheme with die and dry rhyming. The second stanza has a DEEF rhyme scheme with fan and hand being half rhymes. The third stanza has GHIJ rhyme scheme with none of the words rhyming. And I find it interesting that since the theme of this poem is dying, that throughout the stanzas, the words start rhyming less and less, as if this person is unraveling or coming close to dying. Alright, so the basic theme, as I said, of this poem is dying, or what one prefers while dying. And Emily Dickinson, instead of saying me or you, says we. And I think this we encompasses the human race. So she's making a generalization of what we as a human race prefer while we're dying. And I find this interesting because Emily Dickinson hasn't had a lot of contact with humans, but she is making a generalization for all of humankind. But maybe she feels more qualified in making this generalization since she does think about death so much. Anyway, I'm going to take the first 2 stanzas and look at them together. So I'm going to just reread it really quickly. The world feels dusty when we stop to die. We want the dew then, honor's taste dry. Flags vex a dying face, but the least fan, stirred by a friend's hand, cools like the rain. So, in my opinion, what Emily Dickinson is saying, basically, in these 2 stanzas is that when humans die or they're close to dying, people suddenly start to glorify them. They start to glorify the things that they've done, the life they've had, instead of really maybe showing them as they truly were. And we do this in order to honor those who are dying or who have died. But she's saying that when you are the one who's dying, that's not what you want. So she says, the world feels dusty when we stop to die. We want the dew then, honors taste dry. So these honors and this ceremony of a person's life tastes dry. She wants dew, and dew is moisture condensed from the atmosphere, especially at night, and deposited in the form of small drops upon any cool surface. Basically, it's the form of water, and when I think of water, I think of purification. So she's saying that she wants this dew to sort of purify these honors that people are imposing upon the dying because they don't want them. Flags vex a dying face, but the least fan, stirred by a friend's hand, cools like the rain. Flags, again, represent grandeur, excessive ceremony. They fly, they wave in the wind, and they're vexing this dying face. Vex means to bring trouble, distress, or agitation to. She's saying she doesn't want these honors. The human race doesn't want these honors, this excessive ceremony. But the least fan, a fan, like a flag, waves, but it's being stirred by a friend's hand. It's not an excessive ceremony. It's this fan is being stirred by a friend's hand, someone who knows this person, knows their life, knows what they've done, is not going to exaggerate things. And this cools like the rain. And then in the third stanza, Emily Dickinson says, mine be the ministry when thy thirst comes, dues of thyself to fetch, and holy bombs. And in this stanza, she's saying that ministry, of course, means authority, and it's often associated with the clergy and like religion in general, which I find interesting. She's saying that she will be this friend who will cool, her hand will cool like the rain. She will be the one to quench her friends' thirst, their thirst for reality, their thirst to have their life acknowledged in the simple way, in the real way, in real recognition of what they've done, and not just this excessive ceremony, because Emily Dickinson understands what humans want when they're dying, because she's thought about death so much. And that is what I think this poem is about. Then the next poem is a poem that I wrote. Again, it has 11 lines, 3 stanzas, but it's a lot longer than Emily Dickinson's poem. The world feels dusty in your pixelated arms. We are the worrisome worms that crawl through his glassy eyes and sing our way into hollow blood, voices stunned with spines. Anxious hands scorn infected minds, but wide eyes reflecting grainy kisses, staring into his with familiar fanaticism, edges a smile onto blood-bitten lips. Hers be the eyes that share pixel-punched dreams when his nebulous ache devours his fiction and threatens gross lucidity. Worms crawling through his melting mind to hers and wedding then in blissfully infected matrimony. So, this poem is basically about a kid who's become obsessed with a television show and its characters. The pixelated in the first stanza refers to the pixels making up a television screen, and the worrisome worms that crawl through his glassy eyes refer to the characters who he has become invested in, how they have sort of lodged themselves in his brain and he can't think about anything else, become emotionally invested in them. And they sing their way into hollow blood, and this is representing the fact that this kid's life is boring and television is an escape, so he's escaping by watching these television shows. And anxious hands scorn infected minds. This may refer to his parents or anyone else who's concerned with the amount of emotion and energy he's wasting or investing in these shows and characters. And then in the second stanza, he finds someone else who shares in this fanaticism or wildly excessive devotion. And in the third stanza, when he's talking about um, fiction threatening to overcome his happiness at finding these characters, this other person who is similarly invested in these characters helps him get over this fiction, over this reality, and back into the fiction. And these worms, which are the characters, crawl through his melting minds to her, wedding them in blissfully infected matrimony. Blissfully because they don't realize, blissfully infected rather, because they don't realize that this can be damaging, the amount of energy and emotion they are investing in these characters. And this is sort of based off my own life, because I know that I'm personally invested in many characters in fictional universes, and while it is an escape, it can get dangerous sometimes to be so invested. These poems basically have the same structure. They have both 3 stanzas, both 11 lines. My poem doesn't have any rhymes in it, unlike Emily Dickinson's poem, and the subject matters are quite different. Emily Dickinson's poem talks about dying, and my poem can be considered dying, actually, or a metaphorical rebirth, the rebirth of this kid in this alternate universe of his favorite fictional characters. The first stanzas of these 2 poems are quite different. In Emily Dickinson's first stanza, she's establishing we as the humankind as the narrator of the poem, and she's telling them what we want. In the first stanza of my poem, I'm establishing these worms as the main narrator of the poem, and sort of describing the actions of the worms as they sort of crawl into this boy's blood. Second stanzas are actually quite similar. In Emily Dickinson's second stanza, she's talking about how friends can help facilitate the process of dying, and in my second stanza, I'm talking about how this boy has found a friend to share in his obsession. And in the third stanzas, there are more similarities. In Emily Dickinson's poem, she's talking about how she is the friend who will help facilitate the process of dying. And in my third stanza, I talk about how this boy's friend helps him deal with reality by sharing in his obsession. And that is it.